gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? By Great 78.
Who gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? I've seen those English dramas too. They're cruel. So if there's any other way to spell the word, it's fine with me. With me.
Chapter 8. Policy of Truth. Draco. January 4th, 1999. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. NEWT's classes resumed, and with it came the realization for Draco that the school year would soon be coming to a close. It was already more than a third the way over. For over 7 years, Hogwarts had been more of a home than his own home had been, particularly since the war had begun. In 6 months' time, he would be expected to leave the school, and he wasn't sure he was ready. What's more, he would be expected to go somewhere, do something, make something of himself. When his sentence had been handed down at the Wizengamot, the chief warlock had made it quite clear that Draco simply becoming the figurehead of Malfoy Limited, a man of leisure and occasional extortion like his father, would not stand. He would need to find something to occupy his attention, and he would need to prove his worth to society. For high-minded Gryffindors, swotty Ravenclaws, and happy-go-lucky Hufflepuffs, this task was often simple enough. Even most Slytherins were able to find some outlet for their cunning ambition. But for that rare breed of obscenely wealthy, pure-blood sons of the Sacred 28, the task was sometimes doubly difficult. They typically found themselves with not only the usual pressures of a career decision, but with their own familial expectations as well. Until a year ago, Draco had been no different. He knew his mother and father expected him to find a pure-blood witch, wife her, and produce an heir. He would have been expected to dabble in the goings-on of Malfoy Limited, the shell company his family had owned and run for centuries. Nowadays it typically ran itself, with a mostly Muggle board of supervisors and administration that eased the corporation's path to success in the Muggle world. But every Malfoy man, for the last 5 generations since its founding, had held the honorary title of Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of the Board. Now, the company's future profits that typically would have lined his vault had been seized and redirected to reparations for the war. This mattered little to Draco, who already had enough money to live a life of luxury many times over. But it did present a bit of a problem. Once he finished at Hogwarts, what would he do? February 1999. Draco arrived early to most of his classes these days, hoping to catch the professors alone to discuss his progress in the class. He'd witnessed Hermione doing this a few times over the years, but had never felt the need to do it himself. Now, with the desire to prove his worth as his own man, he found himself doing the same. It was this new, ambitious attitude that earned him a spot alongside the Gryffindor Witch for their end-of-year research assignment. Draco was already seated when Professor Thackeray made his way into the classroom, a large stack of folders balanced precariously in his grasp. Thackeray eyed the stack doubtfully, seemingly unsure that the folders would make it all the way to the desk unspilt. Professor, may I help?" Draco stood, grabbing the top half of the folders from the stack.
Thank you, Mr. Malfoy. I'm giving out partnered assignments today, and I didn't wish to mix up the assignments. 'Twould have been a disaster."
Thackeray laughed, neatening the large stack, now that they'd met the surface of the desk at the front of the classroom. Draco felt a light stir of interest in his chest.
Partner assignments? Yes, we're going in depth on various creatures. You'll be expected to learn their origins, habitats, and how to defeat them,"
Thackeray went on absent-mindedly, beginning to sort the stack into 2 piles. "I see," Draco answered. "Sir, if I may be so bold as to ask, who have you assigned to be my partner?" Thackeray frowned, withdrawing a slim pair of folders labelled Kappa. Malfoy, not.
"Oh, I assumed you'd prefer to work with Theodore Nott. He's your fellow Slytherin, and the only other 8th-year wizard in the class."
Draco made a big show of offering an understanding nod. "Professor, I have worked with Theo on projects before, and you're right. We do get on well. Only, I rather thought that the school was trying to discourage working strictly within the house structure this year, in an effort to promote inter-house unity." Thackeray paused, considering. Draco thanked his lucky stars that, as a first-year teacher, Thackeray was a bit more easily influenced than most.
"Perhaps you're right, Mr. Malfoy. Let me see."
He selected another folder from the stack. This one read Incubus, Granger, Weasley.
"How about this? I'll pair you up with Ginevra Weasley, and Mr. Nott can handle Kappas with Hermione Granger."
Draco felt his breath catch in his chest, and he fought to keep his voice even. Knowing Theo's ways with witches, Granger would be in the wizard's bed by March. "Absolutely fucking not," he thought. "Actually, sir, I'd appreciate the opportunity to work with Miss Granger on this. We have been on opposite sides for years, and having the chance to work together and right some of those past wrongs may be the best demonstration of inter-house unity one can think of. Wouldn't you agree?" Thackeray looked uncertain.
"I don't know, Mr. Malfoy. Your situation goes beyond the rivalry between 2 houses, don't you think? I confess I only met the 2 of you in September, but from what I've read in the papers, you weren't just in different houses. The 2 of you fought on opposite sides of the war."
Kindly, the professor left unstated the fact that Draco had been part of a group that had tried to capture and kill people like Hermione. He nodded and swallowed hard, focusing on appearing contrite. "All the more reason to put us together, sir. If we can work together, anyone can. Wouldn't you agree?"
Thackeray nodded slowly. "Perhaps you're right. Well, then, the 2 of you can cover Kappas."
Actually, sir, I completed a project on Kappas in my 4th year." Draco lied smoothly. "I believe I should like the extra challenge of learning about the incubi." Thackeray seemed suitably impressed with his drive and ambition.
"Very well. You and Miss Granger shall work on the incubi. Perhaps Mr. Nott and Miss Weasley—"
Sir," Draco interrupted again, knowing that he was pressing his luck, but figuring that he was already in deep. "The 2 of them dated years ago, and it ended badly for Theo. Best they not work together, I should think." This was not true, but Draco knew that Theo was not above using his newfound proximity to Granger's best friend to get close to the curly-haired witch. Theo would subtly mine the Weaselettes' years of stored knowledge about Granger, then use that to grow closer to her. Besides, if not somehow manage to wrest the Weaselette away from the boy who lived, Draco had a feeling that would end any goodwill that Granger had developed towards him, either.
Thackeray's eyebrows shot up. "Goodness! Yes, that might have been quite horrible. Right, so I shall put Mr. Nott with Mr. Gelland, and Mr. Brant with Miss Weasley."
A few quick taps of the man's wand, and everything was in place.
"There we are. Crisis averted. Thank you for your help, Mr. Malfoy."
"No, thank you, sir," Draco replied graciously, working very hard to keep the smug smile off of his face. He settled back into his seat just as the other students began streaming in. He nodded a polite hello to both Granger and the Weaselette. Ginny Weasley eyed him guardedly, but Granger gave him a very small smile before digging out her textbooks, parchment, and quill. He inhaled a large breath, puffing out his chest before releasing the air in his lungs with a relieved grin that he could not stop from taking over his face. Another step in the right direction. He might be a reformed Death Eater, but after all, Draco Malfoy was still a Slytherin. Early March, 1999. Less than a week later, Draco was headed for lunch in the Great Hall, feeling pretty chuffed. Granger had not immediately refused him as her assignment partner for the Incubus project in Defense Against the Dark Arts. The rest of his classes were going about as well as could be expected, and earlier this morning Granger had thanked him when he held open the door for her as she walked into the Charms classroom. In all, it had been a good week. That was all about to end, he saw now, as he approached the double doors leading into the Great Hall. Theo was standing there, nervously scanning the crowd. When his eyes lit upon Draco, they widened in frantic anticipation. "Don't freak out," Theo said as he approached his dormitory mate. "What's wrong? Are they serving duck à l'orange again?" Theo had a serious aversion to meat that tasted like fruit, and vice versa. "Ha ha, very funny. You're not eating in here. Come with me." Theo took his arm and began steering him towards the little room to the side of the Great Hall. Draco had only entered this room a handful of times, mainly to meet with his father during his early years at Hogwarts, back when Lucius had still been a member of the Board of Governors. A leaden ball began to form in his stomach as he wondered what was in the room that was making Theo so nervous. Theo opened the door, holding it wide for Draco, who entered cautiously. The door closed behind him, and he turned to ask Theo what the hell was going on. But Theo wasn't there. The fire in the fireplace across the room crackled merrily, and Draco's eye caught a bit of movement to his right. Kingsley Shacklebolt stepped from the shadows, offering Draco a warm smile. Draco was unable to return the minister's smile, as he was too busy trying to convince his bollocks to return to their previous natural position in his trousers. Having the Minister for Magic single one out for a one-on-one visit was never a good thing, he knew.
"Mr. Malfoy, such a pleasure to see you again after so many months. I trust your school year has gone well so far."
Yes, Minister. It's a pleasure to see you again as well," Draco said, fighting to keep the anxiety from his voice. Why did Shacklebolt wish to see him in private? Was there a problem with his parole? Were Lucius and Narcissa all right? As though Shacklebolt could read his mind, the wizard spoke to calm him.
"Before we begin, let me reassure you that everyone is fine. All reports from Monaco indicate that your mother is enjoying her time there, and your father is, doing as well as is to be expected."
Draco nodded grimly. "So, what can I help you with, Minister?"
"Shall we sit first?"
The Minister flourished his wand and summoned a table from nearby, settling it between the two chairs in front of the fire. 2 heaping plates of food appeared upon them. Not the detested duck à l'orange, Draco was thankful to see, as he was no fan either. The 2 men settled across from each other. From the corner of his eye, Draco watched as Shacklebolt's movements mirrored his own. Each man placed his napkin carefully in his lap, then lifted his fork, spearing a bite carefully to avoid the metal tines scraping against the china plate. After 3 bites, just as Draco did, Shacklebolt put his fork down and dabbed at the corners of his mouth. It was quite clear that this man had attended the same rigorous etiquette lessons that Draco had in his youth, and he could not easily forget them. Still, the older man did not speak. Well, if he had something to say, Shacklebolt would need to talk first. Draco continued to eat, only mildly perturbed. Finally, when they were nearly halfway done eating, Shacklebolt cleared his throat.
I was hoping to speak to you about your future.
Draco finished his bite, wiping carefully at his mouth to buy himself some time before answering.
My future? Yes. It will interest you to know that Malfoy Limited has been forced into public ownership.
Excuse me, can the Ministry do that? Draco interrupted, startled. Shacklebolt appeared both regretful and evasive.
It is a delicate bit of policy, not entirely up to the Ministry, whilst laws in the mundane British government don't allow it, because Malfoy Limited is an international company. It falls under a different jurisdiction.
Draco gritted his teeth.
I see,
he said, even though he did not.
Shacklebolt sighed. Honestly, Malfoy, it's for the best. This way, a proper executive officer can be chosen. You yourself have to admit that you won't be ready for a number of years, if ever.
He smiled sardonically at the minister. Yes, I suppose having a convicted criminal as your chief executive officer isn't the best look, regardless of whether his name is on the building or not.
Precisely, you understand,
Shacklebolt said, even though Draco heartily did not understand at all. Since when did the Ministry of Magic have that kind of reach?
Nevertheless, I'm not here about Malfoy Limited. The Ministry is in need of your help, and I've come to ask you for a very important favour.
With this, Shacklebolt stood, placing his knife and fork carefully at an angle across the lower edge of his plate. Draco supposed the meal was over. He hurriedly took a huge final bite of his food before placing his silverware to match the minister's. The dinnerware, still half filled with food, vanished as easily as it had appeared. With great effort he swallowed, then choked out, "What can I do for you, sir?" The question was mostly to be polite. Draco knew that he owed this man 100 favours, perhaps even 1,000. Without him convincing Potter and Granger to testify on his behalf, he knew this meal would have been whatever sloppy gruel Lucius was currently enjoying. Shacklebolt looked as though he was choosing his words carefully.
You've gotten to know Hermione Granger better this year, have you not?
Draco paused, confused by the hairpin turn of the conversation. What did this have to do with Granger? Have? It was as much a question as it was a confirmation. Whilst it was true that he'd become more friendly with the witch, they'd exchanged Christmas presents, and had even shared a moment together on New Year's Eve, he would hesitate to call the two of them close. Shacklebolt raised a brow at him. Draco answered with more confidence. Yes, I suppose I have. What of it?
There are questions at the Ministry. Unrest. About Miss Granger's future, you understand. In a very short period of time, Hermione Granger's reputation and legend have grown significantly from an inconsequential muggle-born to the darling of the wizarding world. According to Headmaster McGonagall, she receives dozens of letters of praise a day. The Ministry reviews them all, of course.
I wasn't aware that the Ministry still had a stooge on the staff here. Draco mused. Shacklebolt shot him an ugly look.
Our world has recently gone through a war, Mr. Malfoy, as you well know. We must treat certain acts towards certain figures as threats, no matter how innocuous they seem on the surface.
The older wizard turned away to look into the fire.
As I was saying regarding Miss Granger, I dare say she has become the most popular muggle-born in our world in a century."
Draco tilted his head, considering. "And this concerns the Ministry?" Shacklebolt turned swiftly back to him, and raised his hand in a gesture of helplessness.
"Concern is perhaps a strong word. Let's just say it's taken us by surprise. We're uncertain where Miss Granger fits into the future of the wizarding world, and we'd like to do what we can to shape her path, guide her in choosing the best path."
Draco's forehead furrowed in confusion. "It sounds like you're hoping to tell her what to do."
"No, that's not the Ministry's policy. We don't control... suffice to say, Miss Granger has her own mind made up. She is due in a handful of days to have careers advice with her head of house, and based upon my informal conversations with her over the years, and her past careers advice transcript, we have a general idea of what she's looking to do. We believe she plans to attend a Muggle university that has a magical division. She wishes to study either law or policy in both worlds, it seems. She already has a lot of her future mapped out for herself."
Draco nodded. Hermione Granger was nothing if not ambitious and decisive, sometimes to a fault, he knew. And her sense of justice and egalitarianism was alarmingly apparent.
"Right, so what? Where do I come in?"
Draco asked, still hopelessly lost. Had the Minister for Magic truly only come here to explain to him that Granger had a bright future, and he did not? Shacklebolt swallowed hard.
"We at the Ministry wish for you to tag along, to watch out for her, keep her safe, occupied."
This last word stuck in his mind like a shard of glass underfoot on the bed of the ocean floor. Draco raised a brow, considering.
"Keep her occupied."
Shacklebolt shook his head vigorously.
"I did not mean that in a bad way, but Miss Granger is young and idealistic. She doesn't know what she doesn't yet know. She's full of grandiose ideas and plans and goals, not just for herself, but for our world. To be honest, I'm not certain that she is ready for that. Nor are we ready for her, truth be told."
Draco knew this last bit was likely true. He himself had not been ready for her either. Still, something about all of this wasn't quite sitting right with him. But the Minister charged on, expecting Draco to keep up.
"Miss Granger will be on her own for the first time in her life, unsupported by the structured security and the ease of Hogwarts. She will need a touchstone to tether her to the wizarding world. That's where you come in."
Draco scoffed.
"You think Granger will be all right with allowing me unfettered access to her privacy?
To be honest, Minister, I'm not sure I'm the wizard for the job. Surely there's someone else in the Ministry better placed for the role." It was Shacklebolt's turn to grimace.
"No, this isn't an official request. Therefore, I cannot divert Ministry funds or personnel for this."
"And what, I'm expendable?" Draco sneered.
"In a word, yes."
Shacklebolt nodded shortly.
"Your own career's advice will take place around the same time. Do what you can to find out what Miss Granger's final plans will be, and make the same plans. You will need to stay close to her, and I will do what I can to arrange that."
Draco huffed, torn between disbelief and the small sparks of pleasure those words elicited in the pit of his stomach. "You think she will let me get close?" Shacklebolt gave an upwards nod.
"I think it will be out of her hands, Mr. Malfoy. People like Miss Granger, they often need people like us to watch out for them, to show them the best path, and to keep them busy, occupied, you see, now. This is an important task, Malfoy. I dare say it is in your best interests, in the wizarding world's best interest, for you to comply."
A tiny shiver ran up Draco's spine. It was clear from Shacklebolt's demeanour that this decision was out of Draco's hands. The minister was disguising this as a request, but Draco knew what would happen if he refused. They weren't running out of cells in Azkaban for former Death Eaters, he was certain. 1 or 2 flu calls, a signature on some paperwork, and he could easily find himself there by dinner. "Right, Minister. I understand. Get close and stay close to Hermione Granger. And then what?"
"I'll be in touch. In the meantime, keep this to yourself,"
Shacklebolt said, languidly retrieving a pinch of green powder from a small pouch at his belt. In an instant, the orange flames in the fireplace flickered green, and he was gone. Draco sat there for a long while, considering, long after his next class had begun. His hunger had disappeared, replaced by a gnawing worry. It was clear that Shacklebolt hadn't told him everything, but what he had revealed was confusing. What did all of this mean for him and for Granger?
"What did Kingsley want?"
Theo asked as they strolled together down the hill towards the greenhouses for herbology. Draco evaded the question. "Did he talk to you before he asked you to bring me to him?"
"No. Was it something about your parents or your parole?"
"Sort of. Apparently I have no future, which is no huge surprise or loss, really."
"So what? He just came to tell you that you were washed up, destitute, and headed for a life of ennui?"
The blonde wizard shook his head. "No, apparently he wants me to—" Then Draco hesitated. Perhaps he should tread lightly here. The minister had told him to keep this to himself, so telling Theo would break that word, and whilst it was true that Theo was one of his oldest friends, Theo was still a Slytherin. He was no stranger to deceit. It was entirely possible that Shacklebolt had Theo reporting back to him, waiting for Draco to double-cross him. There was nothing to be gained by telling Theo any of this. Rather, he wants us to try our best to stay on the straight and narrow. Make something of ourselves. Prove that the Slytherins aren't just a bunch of racist assholes, I suppose."
"Ah, damn. I wish I'd known before I paid that 4th year to write my herbology essay,"
Theo quipped.
"Oh well, there's always tomorrow, right?"
The start of April, 1999. The notice for their upcoming careers advice appeared in the form of 3 small cards found on their coffee table a couple of mornings later.
"Oh, good," commented Theo in a mock jovial tone. "Another chance for someone to tell us that we have no future."
He pointed his wand at his card and incendiated it on the spot. Draco licked his lips. "I don't know. Remember, there's a whole world out there who doesn't automatically see us as evil wizards." Theo eyed him critically.
"Never thought of you as the type that would want to go off and live with the hags, mate."
"Get real, Theo. The hags hate us too. I don't know. I've just been thinking more and more that perhaps the Muggle world might be the best place for us," Draco said carefully. Theo's mouth dropped open a bit before he broke into a grin.
Does this have anything to do with Granger?
Draco raised an appraising brow at him. Had Shacklebolt said something? What makes you say that?
Come off it, Drake. I can tell you are still hell-bent on getting your tongue into her knickers.
They were now passing through a group of third-year Ravenclaws, leaving the greenhouses, and several turned to stare in disgust at the two Slytherins. "Salazar's sack, Theo, watch your timing," Draco admonished. They reached the doors of the greenhouse just then, saving Draco from having to confirm Theo's suspicions for him. He couldn't deny that getting closer to Granger was part of his goal, yes, and if this task of Shacklebolt's helped get him there, was it really such a bad thing? Truth be told, when he thought it over in the days after Shacklebolt's departure, he was guardedly optimistic about the whole thing. Even before the minister's visit, when his thoughts grew idle, he had turned over in his mind what finishing Hogwarts meant for him. Stretches of days, possibly even weeks spent alone in Malfoy Manor, with no company aside from his elves. Monotonous galas with the same familiar witches, all of them wondering exactly how much of his wealth the ministry had stripped from him, counting the galleons in his vault, and him knowing that at some point he would be expected to choose one of those witches as a wife. None of it seemed interesting to him, not with Granger flooding his senses. As a child, Draco had been curious about the Muggle world, something that Lucius had shut down with finality. Quirky inventions, odd ways of dressing, pedantic ways of doing tasks. In later years, he would scoff at such things, but as a child he found them fascinating. Now, as he found himself thinking more and more about Granger, he was reminded of that old fascination with the Muggle world. For instance, he felt certain that he was centering in on what a lank was. It was either an animal or some kind of technology known only to Muggles, he felt sure. With the Minister for Magic's command, not only would he have the chance to explore the mundane world, he wouldn't have the choice to avoid it. Shacklebolt had practically ordered Draco to take on this endeavour, and the more he thought about it, the less reason he had for complaint. 2 days later, Draco entered the common room after classes one afternoon to find Theo mixing a drink in the kitchen. "A bit early for it, isn't it? You realize we meet with Slughorn in an hour or so about our futures?" Draco asked, dropping heavily onto the sofa. Theo grinned, coming to sit next to him. "What's the difference? Sluggy's going to be drunk. Why shouldn't I be as well?" "Fair point. So, any ideas of what you plan to do after Hogwarts?"
"I'm wondering if there's any pirate ships looking for a captain."
Theo mused. "I'm fairly certain you have to work your way up to captain. They don't just let anyone walk onto the forecastle of a ship and declare themselves captain." Draco replied drolly.
"What's a forecastle?"
Theo asked, as though he doubted Draco's expertise in the matter as well. "Let me rephrase that." Draco smirked with narrowed eyes. "I don't think they let anyone who doesn't know the basic ship terminology walk onto the forecastle of a ship and declare themselves captain."
Theo shrugged. "Seems like too much work, anyway. And the little I've read about pirates, it sounds as though it's all blokes. Where's the fun in that?"
Draco laughed and reached into his rucksack, shuffling through the brochures he had picked up from the library in anticipation of his careers advice discussion with Slughorn.
"What you got there?"
The other Slytherin asked interestedly, using his wand to summon the pamphlets Draco had dropped onto the table.
"Ooh, Cursebreaker."
Draco squinted at it. "Requires 7 NEWTs. Aren't you only taking 4 NEWT classes?"
Theo grumbled,
selecting another slim yellow parchment.
"Potions mastery, that was always your favourite."
But not Granger's, he knew. I don't think so. I've got a bit of time to decide, I suppose."
"Have you discussed this at all with, Granger?"
Theo asked shrewdly. Draco's eyes widened slightly. Why would I?
Theo laughed. "Well, seeing as how it's April, and you're no closer to entering her chamber of secrets than you were in September, I figured you'd try to follow wherever she goes."
He gritted his teeth. It was true. Even if Shacklebolt hadn't appeared with this supposed ministry task for him to accomplish, he'd have likely wanted to follow Granger. Was it pathetic? Possibly. But it wasn't as though he had a litany of career prospects beating down his door. He literally had nothing better to do. It still irked him, though, the easy and suggestive way Theo talked of her. Draco had always had a possessive streak, and hearing the witch discussed like this grinded every gear he had.
"So, have you asked her?"
Theo interrupted his thoughts. Asked who?
"Granger. Asked what her plans are for after school,"
Theo said, exasperated. Draco sighed. The couple of times he'd broached the subject, she'd rebuffed him instantly. She won't say. I can't get a good answer from her. Just then, the dormitory door from the corridor outside opened, and Granger came inside, looking excited about something. Her eyes glowed like copper coins, and her step was lively and quick. Theo raised a hand, the one holding his drink.
"Hermione, love."
Draco inhaled quickly in annoyance, but said nothing, taking in the deepening blush on Granger's cheeks.
"Both of us are set to go meet with old Sluggy later tonight about our futures. Is that where you're coming from? Careers advice?"
Theo asked easily. "Yes, I just met with Sinistra. Why?" asked Granger.
"Oh, just wondering what she recommended for you,"
Theo said, adopting a nonchalant air.
"Are you off to Ottery St. Catchpole this summer? You and Weasley planning to start pumping out a boogle of tiny little mustelids soon?"
Draco looked sideways, and narrowed his eyes towards his friend. Granger had never been one to answer politely when offered insults. As expected, her hackles went up immediately, but rather than rebuke Theo's nonsense, she countered it. Apparently, he'd struck a nerve. "I'll have you know, Theodore Knott, that I am entirely uninterested in pumping out a boogle of anything. Nor am I headed for Ottery St. Catchpole, for your information. I'll be starting the Muggle and Magical Law program at Oxford University this autumn. Thanks very much for asking." Blessed relief soothed the knot of worry in his stomach, and flooded his face with hope. She looked at him then, and her defiant challenge to his reaction made his insides sing. But he schooled his features. He could not allow her to catch on to his plan of following her too quickly, or she might change her mind about her own future. Once Granger had rushed off to slam herself inside of her bedroom, Theo drained the last of his fire whiskey and smacked his lips in satisfaction.
"Easy as a lamb, that one. I don't know about you, Draco, but I have a feeling that Oxford is my calling as well."
Draco had to offer begrudging respect to the man for gaining that crucial bit of information from her that had been so elusive for him. Still, he questioned Theo's motives. "Why are you doing this, mate? Is this really about some silly competition between you and me for a chance with Granger?" Theo's eyes glittered almost as much as Granger's had.
"What if it is? Scared, Malfoy?"
Draco laughed. "There's a first time for everything, I suppose."
"Fuck off, wanker,"
Theo offered with an agreeable smile.
"I'm headed out. I'm set to meet Sluggy in 10.
Draco nodded.
So, what are you going to tell him?
Theo only smiled.
What do you think? Oxford University won't know what hit it.
The door to the outside corridor closed, and Draco was alone in the 8th year common room. He summoned the bottle of fire whiskey and poured another dram into Theo's forgotten glass, tossing it back with unease, as though it might be hemlock. He was growing closer to Granger. Shacklebolt's words had been right in that regard, he knew. They'd have never had the kinds of easy conversations in their 6th year that they had now, and Shacklebolt was offering him the chance to get even closer to her, even if the whole thing seemed off, highly unusual, and vaguely illegal. The ministry shouldn't be concerned with the fate of one 19-year-old witch, after all. But at Hogwarts, they were surrounded by a magical support system. At Oxford, they would be two of a very small handful, largely left to their own devices to sink or swim. She might come to rely on him, trust him. She might even come to care about him. So why did he feel like he was deceiving her? Because you are, mate, his conscience told itself. You aren't going to tell her about Shacklebolt's strange request, because it might remind her that, at heart, you're a conniving wizard with a predilection for darkness. Shacklebolt knows it. That's why he's chosen you. Across the common room, Granger's door remained closed, and it'll stay that way if you tell her that you have agreed to spy on her for the Minister for Magic. Draco sighed, pouring a second drink. He picked up the brochure labelled Oxford University, Muggle and Magical Law, from the pile. He opened the folded page to see what his future held. Thank you for listening to Who Gives a Fuck About an Oxford Comma by Great 78. If you enjoyed the story and would like to listen to more, please follow me on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts by searching for Silver and Copper. Or you can find me under Great 78 on Archive of Our Own.